It started with a secret, a small one, a moment, a late night phone call, a business trip that didn't make sense, a lingering look my mother tried to brush off with a forced smile. I was only 10, but children sense these things. We may not have the language for betrayal, but we know when love starts to rot. My name is Claire. I'm 30 now, and I've spent most of my adult life unpacking something that began with a silence at the dinner table. My story isn't unique, and maybe that's the saddest part, because cheating doesn't just happen between two people. It echoes, it splinters, it invades the spaces between siblings, between parent and child, between who we thought we were and who we learn we've become. My father had an affair. That's the simple version. The real story is longer, heavier. It started with late nights at the office, quiet arguments muffled behind closed doors, my mother's eyes red-rimmed in the mornings. But no one said anything. We still smiled in photos, still went to church on Sundays, still celebrated birthdays with cake and candles like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. I remember sitting at the top of the stairs, watching my parents in the kitchen below. My mother's voice trembling, my father's hands in his pockets, saying nothing. I remember the sound of my little brother playing with Legos behind me, oblivious. I remember thinking, even then, something has cracked, and it's only going to grow wider. My mom was the kind of woman who baked cookies after school and wrote notes in our lunchboxes. She sang off-key in the car. She believed in family. My dad, I don't really know anymore. I remember his cologne, the way he used to carry me on his shoulders, how he always seemed so confident, so in control. But when the affair surfaced, when the whispers became evidence, he became someone else. Or maybe he always was, and we were just catching up to the truth. I never heard the full confrontation. I don't know if there was one. One day he was there, and the next he wasn't. My mom sat us down at the kitchen table and said, "Dad is going to live somewhere else for a while." She said it calmly, like she was telling us the weather. I looked at my brother. He was 6. He blinked and went back to his juice box. I felt something shift in my chest. Not a break, but a bending. A slow, quiet folding inward. That was the beginning of distance, of secrets layered over secrets, of not knowing what questions I was allowed to ask. I didn't understand it all then, but I do now. Infidelity is never just about sex. It's about abandonment. It's about rewriting a story the rest of us thought we were living in. And for children, it never ends when the affair ends. The story lives on, in the quiet, in the echoes, in everything that follows. This is what followed in my life. When my father left, it wasn't with a bang. It was with the car door shutting gently one early Saturday morning and the soft click of the lock behind him. I watched from the hallway window, hugging my knees to my chest as he pulled out of the driveway. He didn't look up. He didn't wave. That silence was louder than any scream. In the days that followed, my mother moved through the house like a ghost. She cooked, she cleaned, she packed our lunches, but she didn't hum to the radio anymore. She didn't laugh when my brother made silly faces. She didn't sing off-key in the car. The music of our home had stopped. I didn't know what to do with the silence, so I became quieter too. I stopped asking questions, stopped inviting friends over, stopped trying to make her laugh. It felt like any small joy I brought home would be unwelcome, like playing with glitter in a funeral home. My brother, on the other hand, responded with noise. He became louder, more defiant. He threw tantrums at the grocery store, slammed doors, broke toys. He would scream at Mom and then cry when she didn't react. I remember watching him and thinking, he's trying to get a reaction, any reaction. But she had none left to give. One night, I came downstairs for water and found her sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. A mug of tea untouched in front of her, her face blank. She didn't hear me. Or maybe she did and didn't want to show it. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, until I slowly turned back and crept up the stairs, feeling like I had walked in on something sacred and devastating. There was no family meeting, no therapy, no collective healing. Just this slow unraveling. My father called every now and then, his voice too cheerful, asking how school was, what I wanted for my birthday. I gave him one-word answers. I didn't know how to be honest without being cruel. And I didn't want to hear his voice sound so normal when everything he left behind was anything. But we still celebrated birthdays, still put up the Christmas tree, but everything felt like play acting. As if we were pretending to be a family for the benefit of the calendar, not because we believed in it anymore. I remember one day at school, during art class, we were told to draw our families. I drew my mother, my brother, and myself. The teacher came over and asked, "Where's your dad?" I stared at the paper, then added a stick figure far off in the corner of the page, outside the house. That was the first time I realized I saw him as something separate, something removed, not part of us anymore. Mom eventually stopped setting a place for him at dinner. The framed family photo on the mantle was replaced with one of just us three. His jackets disappeared from the hallway. The echo of his absence faded into something almost like routine. But the damage wasn't routine. The ripple had begun. It started with silence, then sadness, then shifts in behavior too subtle to name, but too big to ignore. It changed how I saw my mother. It changed how I saw men. It changed how I saw myself. And I was only a child. What I didn't know then, but understand now, is that the affair didn't just end a marriage. It redefined our entire family. It planted seeds of mistrust, of insecurity, of grief we didn't know how to name. It made us all actors in a story we never chose. And the curtain was only just rising. Trust, once broken, doesn't shatter with a sound. It erodes slowly, like wind carving through stone. And in our home, trust wasn't just gone, it was taboo. We didn't talk about what had happened. We didn't ask where Dad went or if he'd come back. We didn't ask Mom how she was doing. We just adapted, the way people do when they're trying to survive the slow collapse of something sacred. By the time I was 12, I had mastered silence. I knew which topics would make Mom flinch. I knew that asking too much would leave her staring off, blinking away tears she refused to let fall. She had become a fortress, stoic, guarded, unreachable. There were moments, though, glimpses of the woman she used to be. I remember one afternoon, I came home from school and found her in the kitchen, staring at an old photo of her and Dad. Her hand hovered over it, not quite touching. When she noticed me, she shoved it in a drawer like contraband. That drawer became her graveyard. Old letters, wedding photos, anything that hinted at a life that once was. My brother, Ethan, was starting to unravel. He acted out at school, lying, stealing small things, fighting with classmates. Teachers called, guidance counselors scheduled meetings, but Mom always handled it alone. "He's just going through a phase," she'd say, but her eyes said otherwise. I could see it. Fear that he was becoming too much like the man who left us. I began to take on a role I didn't ask for, the quiet protector. I did the dishes without being asked. I helped Ethan with homework, even when he yelled at me. I tucked him in at night, whispering that everything would be okay, even when I wasn't sure I believed it. My mother clung to me in a way that made me feel both loved and burdened. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was her emotional partner, her confidant, her crutch. Looking back, I know that's what they call parentification, when a child becomes the emotional caretaker of the parent. But back then, I just thought it was what daughters did. The hardest part wasn't the pain. It was the pretending. Pretending we were fine. Pretending school projects and birthday parties still mattered. pretending we were still a family when really we were three people adrift in different boats, trying to paddle back to shore without speaking to each other. There were times I resented Mom. Her sadness felt selfish. I wanted her to fight, to scream, to say something that would name what we were going through. But she didn't. She just shut down, closed the doors, packed away her rage, and handed us quiet instead. I began to journal secretly. Pages and pages filled with questions I couldn't ask aloud. Did he love her more? Did he love us at all? Was it something we did? Was I not enough? I wrote things I was too afraid to feel. I wrote because there was no one to talk to. Not really. Once, I accidentally left my journal under my pillow. Ethan found it. He didn't say anything, just pushed it back at me later that night and whispered, "I don't think it was your fault." I never cried in front of anyone after that. Not even him. That was the year our dog died. The only one who felt like a steady presence. Mom cried for the first time in months. I remember sitting beside her on the couch, both of us holding the dog's collar, not saying a word. It was grief we could finally name. And maybe that's why it broke us open. For a week after that, she was different. Softer. She made pancakes for dinner, took us to a movie, actually laughed, when Ethan spilled soda on her jeans. And just when I started to believe we were healing, she found a picture of Dad with his new partner on Facebook. She slammed the laptop shut, so hard the screen cracked. That night, I heard her sobbing through the bathroom door. After that, she changed again. The softness vanished. Rules became stricter. Questions went unanswered. Her pain turned into quiet punishment. I got grounded for being 5 minutes late. Ethan lost his phone for forgetting to take out the trash. It wasn't about the rules. It was about control. The one thing she still had left. Our home didn't feel like a home anymore. It was a place we passed through carefully, avoiding landmines. Trust had left the building, and in its place we had fear, distance, and a shared sense that love was something fragile, too fragile to believe in again. I was 13 when I promised myself I'd never let someone hurt me the way he hurt her. I didn't know it yet, but that promise would follow me for the rest of my life. By the time I turned 18, I had learned how to wear masks. I was the reliable one, the straight-A student, the girl who always smiled in group photos and said, "I'm fine," even when I wasn't, especially when I wasn't. No one tells you how grief mutates when it's never spoken aloud. It becomes something you carry in the marrow of your bones. And that's what I took with me when I left for college. A suitcase, a box of books, and years of unspoken pain pressed tight beneath my ribs. College was my first taste of freedom. No more walking on eggshells, no more curfews, no more pretending the air in our house wasn't thick with ghosts. But the damage came with me. I didn't know how to trust anyone. I assumed people would leave. I found it easier to be alone than to be disappointed. I dated a boy my sophomore year, Daniel. Sweet, kind, overly patient. He held my hand like it was something sacred. I remember thinking, this is what safe feels like. But safety felt foreign. I waited for the lie. I waited for the betrayal. I scanned his phone when he was in the shower. I memorized the girls in his contact list. I asked questions I had no right to ask. Not because I wanted control, because I was terrified of surprise. Eventually, he left. Not with anger, but with sadness. "You don't trust me," he said. "You don't even let me in." He was right. I cried for days, not just for him, but for the way I had become my own prison. I had inherited my mother's silence, my father's deceit, and turned it inward. I didn't know how to be in love without preparing for abandonment. My brother didn't fare any better. By 20, Ethan had already dropped out of community college and was working night shifts at a mechanic's garage. He drank too much, slept too little, and never talked about Dad. If I ever brought it up, he'd laugh bitterly and say, "That guy? He's dead to me." But it wasn't anger that lived behind his words. It was grief and loss, and a little boy who had once built Lego castles while his parents fought in the next room. We were grown now, technically, but the child inside each of us was still trying to piece together what happened, still looking for the moment it all broke, and wondering if it could have been different. There's a term for this: intergenerational trauma. The pain that doesn't end with one person, but gets passed down like an unwanted heirloom. My mom carried it from her parents. Her own father had left when she was 9, and now it lived in us. We didn't know how to talk about love without bracing for loss. We didn't know how to argue without fearing it was the end. We didn't know how to hope. At 23, I started therapy. The first time I said the words, "my father cheated," my voice cracked. Not from shame, but from the weight of how long I had carried it without setting it down. The therapist asked me what I needed to hear back then, when I was 10 or 12 or 16. I said that it wasn't my fault, that I was allowed to feel angry, that I wasn't supposed to fix it. She wrote something down, looked at me, and said, "Then let's start there." It took months, but I slowly learned to name the feelings I had buried: rage, guilt, confusion, loneliness. I learned that I had been in survival mode for most of my life. That being the strong one doesn't mean you're not broken. One day, I got a message from Dad. We hadn't spoken in over 5 years. He asked if we could meet. He said he was sorry. He said he missed me. I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit in my inbox like a wound I wasn't sure I was ready to touch. But something in me, curiosity, maybe, or the desire to finally close the chapter, said yes. We met at a diner off the highway. He looked older, softer, smaller somehow. He asked me how I was. I told him the truth, still figuring it out. We talked for 2 hours. He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to rewrite history. He just said I failed, and I wish I could undo it. But I know I can't. I didn't forgive him that day, but I stopped hating him, and that felt like a beginning. People like to think cheating is just between two people, that the damage begins and ends with the couple involved. But that's never the case. The truth is, infidelity doesn't just crack a marriage, it fractures an entire family system. The ripple doesn't stop at the edge of the bed. It spreads to living rooms, holidays, bloodlines. After Dad left, our relationships with the rest of the family shifted in ways I didn't expect. My grandmother, Dad's mother, stopped calling. For years, she had sent birthday cards, little notes in the mail, even small savings bonds for college. Then silence, as if we had vanished along with him. Mom never spoke ill of her, but I could see the hurt in her face. It was betrayal on top of betrayal, as if once the man left, his side of the family did too. Aunt Melissa, Dad's younger sister, was the only one who kept in touch. She sent texts now and then, and one year, she invited me to her wedding. I was 18. I brought a dress that covered my arms and my cautiousness. I hadn't seen Dad in 3 years, and I didn't know if he'd be there. He wasn't, but his name came up, casually, like a ghost walking through the reception. People said things like, "He's doing well," or "Still with that woman," and quickly moved on. I didn't know whether to feel relief or resentment. Maybe both. That night, one of Melissa's cousins, someone I barely knew, pulled me aside and said, "You look just like your dad, you know." I smiled politely, but inside something recoiled. I didn't want to look like him. I didn't want to carry his face into rooms he'd never have the courage to walk back into. The damage showed up in smaller ways too. Family reunions were no longer an option. Christmas became awkward negotiations. Will Dad be there? Should we invite him? What will the kids say? We stopped doing big Thanksgivings. No more cookouts with the cousins. Everything felt divided, awkward, rehearsed. Like we were all tiptoeing around a wound we hadn't agreed to acknowledge. Even my mom's side of the family changed. My uncle once told her, maybe if you'd been more affectionate, he wouldn't have left. She never spoke to him again. The fracture was generational, too. When my cousin got married, she didn't invite her father either. He had cheated on her mother when she was 10. I remember sitting with her in the bridal suite, pinning her veil and hearing her say, I just didn't want that energy there. It's supposed to be sacred. That's what cheating does. It leaves a legacy, a ripple that keeps touching every milestone long after the betrayal is over. When I got engaged, I hesitated before telling anyone. Not because I wasn't happy, but because a part of me didn't trust good things to last. I told my mom first. Her face lit up, but her eyes held something else. Fear. Just make sure you really know him, she said. People can hide who they are. That's the thing. Infidelity doesn't just damage the present, it rewires how we see the future. It teaches us to brace, to doubt, to protect ourselves even in joy. My fiancé, Mark, came from a stable family. His parents were still together. He didn't understand why I flinched when he didn't text back quickly, or why I panicked if he seemed distant. I had to explain that love, for me, had never been predictable. That my blueprint was broken. To his credit, he listened. He didn't try to fix it, just stayed, patient, present. It wasn't just about rebuilding trust in a partner. It was about rebuilding belief in the concept of family, that it could be safe, that it didn't have to end in smoke. My wedding was small, intentional. We didn't invite Dad. Not out of anger, just clarity. I didn't want to spend my wedding day navigating his shadow. Instead, Ethan walked me down the aisle. It was the first time in years we had laughed like children. The first time in years our family felt like something we chose, not something we were trying to hold together out of duty. Because the truth is, sometimes rebuilding doesn't mean restoring what was lost. Sometimes it means creating something new from the ashes and choosing, every day, not to repeat the pattern. Healing didn't happen all at once. It came in moments, small, almost forgettable ones. The first time I slept through the night without waking from a dream of being left. The first time I made breakfast without hearing my mother's quiet weeping in my mind. The first time I heard someone say, I love you, and believed it might actually mean something safe. After the wedding, I thought things would settle, that maybe I had finally stepped beyond the shadow of my past. But healing is a circle, not a straight line. I still flinched when Mark touched my back unexpectedly. Still spiraled when we argued, afraid a disagreement meant the beginning of the end. Still caught myself over-explaining, over-apologizing, overcompensating, because somewhere deep down, I was still that little girl trying to keep her family from falling apart. Mark was patient. He never told me to just get over it. He sat with me in the mess. He didn't need me to be fixed. He needed me to feel safe. And slowly, with therapy, journaling, and time, I started to let go of the fear that love always came with a catch. Therapy changed everything. It gave me language for what had always felt unspeakable. I learned to stop minimizing what I'd been through. I learned that trauma doesn't always scream, it whispers. It hides in how you react, how you push people away, how you live in survival even when the danger has long passed. One session in particular shifted something. My therapist asked me to close my eyes and picture my 10-year-old self. She asked what that little girl needed to hear. I imagined her sitting at the top of the stairs again, clutching her knees, listening to the silence after her father left. I walked up to her, knelt down, and said, "You didn't cause this. You don't have to carry it. You are so deeply loved, even when it feels like the world is breaking." And I cried, not the quiet tears I'd learned to control, but the full body, shoulder-shaking kind. Because for the first time, I believed it. Forgiveness came slowly. First for myself, for not being able to keep the family together, for taking on too much, for the anger I used to direct inward. Then, cautiously, for my dad. Not because he deserved it, but because I did. I forgave him to stop letting his choice define my life. I forgave him so I could stop using his failure as proof that love can't be trusted. I forgave him so I could build something new without dragging the ruins behind me. Mom took longer. Her pain was rooted deeper. She never remarried. She never really opened back up. Sometimes I think she was more loyal to the grief than to herself. But even in that, I found compassion. We talked more after I got married. About small things at first, recipes, weather, garden advice, then bigger things. She once said, "I wish I had found the courage to ask for help. I thought I had to be strong, but I was just scared." That's when I realized she did the best she could with the tools she had, just like I was doing now. Ethan began healing in his own way too. He quit drinking, found a job he liked, adopted a dog. He called me one day and said, "I don't want to be angry anymore." That was his beginning. The three of us, me, Mom, Ethan, will never be the family we once were. But we've built something else, something honest. We say "I love you" more now. We show up. We listen. Healing isn't about going back. It's about deciding what comes next. It's about creating spaces where secrets don't grow, where feelings are safe to name, where love isn't conditional on silence. And for the first time, I believe that's possible. Because healing doesn't erase the wound. It teaches you how to live with the scar and still reach for joy anyway. Some inherit land. Some inherit jewelry, recipes, or stories. I inherited silence. The kind that fills a room without sound. The kind passed down not by intention, but by necessity. The kind that says, "We don't talk about that." For generations, my family tucked pain under the rug. My grandmother never spoke about my grandfather's abandonment. My mother never unpacked my father's betrayal. And for years, I nearly continued the cycle, pretending, smiling, shrinking when the truth begged to be seen. But the thing about silence is that it doesn't protect. It preserves the wound. So when I found out I was pregnant, I made a vow I will not pass this on. The news came with joy, of course, but also fear. I'd spent years learning how to trust, how to love, how to speak. Was I ready to raise a child with a legacy like mine? Would I instinctively become too soft, too harsh, too afraid? Would I be able to raise a child without projecting the weight I had carried for so long? I brought it up in therapy. My therapist smiled and said, "The fact that you're asking these questions means you're already breaking the pattern." Still, it wasn't easy. During pregnancy, I often woke from dreams of being left, of being a single mother, of my child looking at me with the same wounded eyes I once had. Mark always pulled me back gently, reminding me we're not them. This is a new story. When our daughter was born, I cried, not just from joy, but from grief. Grief for every girl in my family who didn't get this chance. Grief for my mom, who carried her pain in silence. Grief for myself, the child I was, the woman I became. But in that hospital room, with the soft rhythm of her breathing and Mark holding my hand, I felt something I'd never felt before: freedom. Not from the past, but from its control. Naming her was a deliberate act. We chose the name Hope, not because we expected her to fix anything, but because she represented everything we were building now. Something rooted not in fear, but in truth. I talked to Mom more in those early weeks than I had in years. She came to visit, held Hope close, and whispered, "I wish I had done this differently." She wasn't just talking about motherhood. She was talking about life. One night, after Hope had fallen asleep on my chest, I opened my old journal. The one I had filled as a teen with fear, anger, longing. I flipped through the pages and found the one where I had written, I'll never trust love again. I traced the letters with my fingers, then turned to a new page. I wrote I was wrong. I can trust again. I just had to learn how. Legacy doesn't have to mean repetition. It can mean reckoning. It can mean reflection. It can mean choosing something different. I don't know what mistakes I'll make as a mother. I know I'll make them, but I also know I'll talk about them. I'll teach my daughter that love isn't the absence of conflict. It's the willingness to repair, to listen, to try again. One day, when she's old enough, I'll tell her about her grandfather. I'll tell her about the silence that shaped me, the storms I walked through to build a quieter life for her. I'll tell her the truth, not to weigh her down, but to show her the strength of speaking. Because cycles don't end by accident. They end by choice. And I choose this, to be the last generation in my family who carried this kind of pain in silence. I choose to break it. For her, for me, for all the women before us who never got the chance. This story didn't begin with me. It began long before I was born, with a pattern of silence, with betrayals unspoken, with pain folded neatly into generational memory. But I am the one who gets to end it. And that's the truth so many of us forget. We can choose to end what hurt us, not by pretending it never happened, but by honoring it and then choosing differently. Cheating isn't just a mistake between two people. It's a rupture that ripples through the lives of everyone touched by it. It changes how children see love, how they learn to trust, how they build relationships of their own. It teaches fear where there should have been safety. It replaces connection with survival. But it doesn't have to stay that way. We heal by speaking. We heal by seeing ourselves not as broken, but as becoming. We heal by naming the wound and then learning to live beyond it. I don't share this story for pity. I share it because someone somewhere needs to know they're not alone, that their pain is real, that their mistrust isn't irrational. It's a scar from a storm they didn't choose. And more importantly, that it can get better. Whether you were the child caught in the crossfire, the partner who was betrayed, or the one who made the mistake, there is space for redemption, for reconciliation, for new stories to begin. If this story touched something in you, if you saw yourself in the cracks and the quiet, I hope you leave knowing this. You are not doomed to repeat what broke you. You can heal. You can build. You can become the kind of person, the kind of parent, the kind of partner you never thought possible. Because the legacy of pain only continues when we let it. Let's choose to end it. Let's choose something better. And if this story meant something to you, I invite you to take a moment. Speech balloons, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice could be the thing that helps someone else feel less alone. Like this video if it resonated with your heart. Subscribe to Lies Unveiled for more true stories that speak the quiet truths we're often afraid to tell. Because healing begins when the silence ends. And here we speak the truth.